Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your patience while we got that little audio issue sorted out. Today is Saturday, January 26, 2019. Welcome to this extraordinary new year and this opportunity for us to gather together today to just have a couple hours of escape and of connection to something greater than perhaps we've ever conceived before. I'm very grateful that you're all here today and looking forward to sharing this presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now, and we'll move forward with our presentation. We'll just dive right in, okay? So there we go. To begin, again, thank you for being here. This is the lost art of living ascension. And obviously, we're going to be talking a lot about sacred art and how it applies to our ascension. This great moment that we're living in right now is a moment of global initiation. It's a moment when we are coming together to define who we are as a species and how we can ultimately move forward. And I believe that the key to this is in the lost art of living ascension, the teachings left here by the great masters throughout the ages. I'd like you to email me at whenrytn@earthlink.net just to say hello, say if you enjoyed the webinar, if you have any comments, or if you would like to keep in touch on some of the ideas. You can, of course, go to my website, williamhenry.net as well, where I have a number of articles related to this subject. Our presentation today is going to be a sort of an introduction as a packet, a download in and of itself, but it's actually the front door or gate to a much larger and more comprehensive presentation that Claire and I will be giving in Nashville in April 6th and 7th, 2019. I'd love for you all to join me and join Claire and I here in Nashville. If you are interested in coming, again, drop me an email and I'll send you a special discount for participating today so you can have some savings on your ticket to Emergence in Nashville. Wonderful gathering here in Music City, USA. And I also want to acknowledge and thank Claire, my wife. We've been walking this road on the Art of Ascension for 8 years now. We've spent a lot of time in museums and galleries and art collections around the world. We're trying to magnetize ourselves as a go-to place for people with extraordinary examples in private collections, some of which you're going to see today, of the art of ascension, the lost art of ascension, artwork that guides us into our own ascension. So let's open up now. Let's begin with a fact that around 200,000 years ago, there was some mysterious event occurred that spontaneously led to the modern human brain coming into existence in Africa. And this moment is what Michelangelo and other great artists have tried to encapsulate. And indeed, what Michelangelo has done here is shown the Old Testament God, along with his female consort, the Shekinah, the divine glory, the divine radiance, who are floating in a cloud, and they are transmitting something to Adam. This is that moment when Adam becomes a living being. And it is the most extraordinary moment for all of us because ultimately, archetypically, Adam symbolizes all of us. And in fact, my wife Claire and I have been on this path for over 8 years now. This is Claire here at a museum in Nashville when we were enjoying a Tibetan exhibit. And we are trying to create a space for this art, to create the ultimate collection of the art of ascension. Now, and I want to begin with this extraordinary fact that around 200,000 years ago, some mysterious event occurred that spontaneously led to the modern human brain coming into existence in Africa. And this extraordinary moment is captured here by Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel at the Vatican. And it's been captured by other artists as well. And what we see is the Old Testament God, Yahweh, floating in a cloud, along with his divine feminine counterpart, the Shekinah or Shekinah, transmitting something to Adam. And whatever it was that this figure, Yahweh in the Old Testament, transmitted to Adam, and whatever the divine feminine Shekinah also transmitted to Adam, resulted in a transformation of Adam, and archetypically speaking, he is all of humanity. So this moment is a moment of activation of all of humanity. Michelangelo portrayed Adam as a perfect-looking Greek athlete. His finger is extended to receive an infusion of what the Jewish mystics referred to as soul or neshama. Adam echoes the Kabbalistic and the Hermetic vision of the perfection of the original man. This is the most important understanding we have to get a hold of in order to understand the whole process and the meaning of sacred art and why it has such a profound impact on us. It is because in the mystical traditions, Adam and Eve, all of humanity, originally were not in a flesh and blood form. We originally were divine light beings. And then after the fall of man is when we no longer were in our original light being form. We still have this divine essence, the neshama, the Holy Spirit that is transmitted at this moment, but it got, in a way, covered up, lost, forgotten. And we began to emphasize our physical being, our flesh and blood bodies, as opposed to developing and connecting with our original light bodies. Reconnecting with our original light bodies is what we refer to as ascension. Ascension is a return to our original state of wholeness and indeed holiness, and a return to our original light being status. Several years ago, a very clever neurosurgeon was in the Sistine Chapel, and he looked up and he said, "Oh my gosh, Michelangelo has portrayed Yahweh and the Shekinah in a shape that clearly resembles the cutaway of a human brain." Now, at this time, we didn't know as much about human anatomy as we do now. And it was very curious, in fact, that Michelangelo would have had an understanding of the shape of the human brain when seen in profile. And the question that comes along with this is, for what purpose was our neocortex activated, and by what mechanism? These are the great questions of neuroscience, of life, and indeed, as we're going to see, of art as well. For what purpose was our neocortex activated? The neocortex, says Carl Sagan in his iconic work Cosmos, is where matter is transformed into consciousness. It's the realm of intuition and critical analysis. It's in the neocortex where we have our ideas, our inspirations, where we read, write, where we compose music, and indeed where we create art itself. If the neocortex is not switched on 200,000 years ago, we are not having this conversation. As Sagan said, the neocortex is the distinction of our species. It's the seat of our humanity. Civilization, in fact, is the product of our cerebral cortex. And if we think of our spinal cord as a tree with the brain on top, the neocortex is the new bark. And indeed, that is what the word neocortex means, is new bark. And again, for emphasis, it's what makes possible our judgments and our knowledge of good and evil. And remember, this is central to Judeo-Christian and Islamic tradition. And it can be found in other traditions as well, that at one time humanity was in a more perfect state of being, and then we fell. We then, as a result of our fall, at least according to the Old Testament, the book of Genesis, after the fall, Adam and Eve could distinguish between good and evil. They knew that they were naked. They knew that they were separate from all that is. The only way Adam and Eve could have made that distinction of separateness is with an activated neocortex. So it's this moment of activation of the neocortex that I think Michelangelo is trying to capture. Something from somewhere mysteriously activated our neocortex, and after that, we have the capacity to make art, but also to distinguish me from you, us from them, light from dark, good from evil. Very important premise as we're going to continue. something activated these capabilities. But what? In Judeo-Christian, Islamic tradition, which is subscribed to by, 4.5 billion people on this planet, that something is what is portrayed in this image here by Hieronymus Bosch. That something is a serpentine-type being that offered a fruit to Adam and Eve. And after they ate of this fruit, they could make judgments. That means their neocortex was activated. So in these images that we will see here, we're asked to consider that the tree that the serpent lives within is our spinal cord. And the new bark of that tree is our neocortex. And at that moment that Eve partook of that fruit and shared it with Adam, her neocortex was activated, and suddenly she is a different type of being than before that neocortex is activated. When the neocortex was switched on, we lost our perfection. Perfection means to be more whole, more holy, more complete, and compassionate. All of the mystical traditions are aimed at reclaiming this original perfection. The Judeo-Christian tradition is explicit that after the neocortex was activated, we lost our perfection and we were given coats of skin. Flesh and blood skins, these human bodies. Before this time, we're in a different form. But then our neocortex is activated and suddenly we find ourselves in coats of skin. And what we must realize, that as Jewish tradition emphasizes, is that when Adam and Eve dwelt in the Garden of Eden, they were clothed with a garment, which is the garment of heavenly light, which was used in the Garden of Eden. So what this means is that when humanity lived in the Garden of Eden, we were in a different form. We had perfect bodies of light, and all the mystical traditions were created to return us to that original perfection. And the question is, how do we do that? The Kabbalistic theory of humanity's origins is what prompted Paul's comment, that there was a heavenly Adam in the spiritual world and an earthly Adam in the material world. This points to the idea that there are two aspects of ourselves, an earthly self and a celestial self, a light being self, a perfected self. This is a theme that we will develop as we continue. As I said, ever since this moment when Adam and Eve were evicted from the Garden of Eden, we have sought to return or transform, ascend from our fallen state, quote unquote, into our original state as perfect beings of light. In the Tibetan tradition, which we will discuss in a moment, in their rainbow body or great perfection tradition, they tell us that beyond our material and emotional body, we have a body of light. Deep inside you, there is a pure being, a pure light, a pure energy existing in total potentiality. And it is what has manifested your physical body. And at some point in our spiritual evolution, we can return to our original state of perfection. Question is, how do we activate these capabilities? How do we return or ascend to our original state of being? That is what we have gathered today to explore. In the Tibetan tradition, the rainbow light body tradition, they tell us that the human body was in fact designed to be spun into a vortex of energy that ultimately dissolves the physical body into 5-colored rainbow light, leaving behind only hair, toe, and fingernails, which have no nerves to be transmuted. The Dalai Lama, were he teaching this class today, would tell you that you have been working lifetime after lifetime after lifetime in order to effect this transformation and to return to this original state of being. He would also tell you that you can accomplish this in one lifetime, and he would tell you that the way he learned to do this was by looking at images. There are no texts in the Tibetan tradition that tell you how to do this. It is all transmitted through images. This is our first hint or clue that the images can show us the way to return to our original state of being. All of human history, in my view, is a quest for ascension to this higher state of consciousness and to this state of wholeness and holiness, that state of ascension or as an ascended being. The question is, once again, how do we do that? And what I'm going to suggest to you is that based on the work that Claire and I have been doing and sharing in our workshops and elsewhere, is that sacred art is perhaps the greatest key that you can include in your toolkit of Ascension teachings. The reason why art is so important is because, as the book of Genesis says, the Elohim, the shining ones, the plural gods, said, "Let us make man in our image after our likeness." We are made in the image of a higher being. We are a work of art. We are a work of art. Created, not created, but let's just say fashioned, tweaked by a higher form of consciousness. After fashioning the universe, says the book of Genesis, God fashions an image, a work of art, Adam, and breathes his spirit into him, and Adam becomes a living being. This is what Michelangelo showed us a moment ago in the Sistine Chapel. And here we see God portrayed not as a bearded man in a cloud, but rather a Christ-like figure surrounded by angels, coming out of in fact, a vortex of angels, transmitting through the breath some kind of divine essence that raises Adam from a non-living being to a living being. From Adam's rib, from this creation, this work of art, God creates another image, another work of art, Eve. She's pulled from within the image of Adam. When we start to look at the human race as a work of art, it suddenly opens up our consciousness and begins to plug us into the idea that has been transmitted throughout the ages. In many ancient mythologies, creation mythologies, from the Sumerian to the Egyptians, to the Babylonians, to the Greeks, to Hindu mythology, the human body was made out of clay. It's sculpted. The human body is a work of art. And of course, clay can be interpreted on multiple levels. It's probably not literal clay of the earth, but rather the clay is a reference to DNA and other materials that were utilized by this great artistic God being who fashioned our body. According to the Quran, God created man from clay. And in American folklore, Wonder Woman was sculpted from clay by her mother and given life by the Greek gods. The story continues. According to these religious traditions, this work of art, the human body, was lifeless until the otherworldly artists breathed life or spirit into their artificial creations, and we became us. We are icons or images of artistic parents. What is the life spirit that they transmitted to us? Why did they activate our neocortex? Did the shining ones actually do that, or is there another force out there that perhaps activated our neocortex for maybe not a reason that has to do with the light, but rather to enfold us in darkness? The clear point here is that the neocortex is the place we really need to begin to understand and look at to see how we as works of art, as images of our Creator, can activate our hidden capabilities. A brain researcher, neuroscientist named Del Philippe, says that the hominid brain grew at an accelerating pace until it reached its present size of 1500 cc about 200,000 years ago. Yet uniquely human capabilities such as the invention of highly sophisticated, standardized, multi-part tools, tailored clothes, art, religious belief, and even language are thought to have emerged quite rapidly 40,000 years ago. a difference of 160,000 years ago, or 160,000 years, a sudden explosion of human mental abilities and culture that is sometimes called the Big Bang takes place. And if the brain reached its full human potential, or at least its size, if it's activated 200,000 years ago, why did it remain idle for 150 or 160,000 years? Scientists in the US and Switzerland have made an astonishing discovery that all humans alive today are the offspring of a common father and mother, an Adam and Eve, who emerged on the planet 100 to 200,000 years ago. The same is true for 9 out of 10 of all other species on the earth, meaning that nearly all Earth's creatures living today sprang into being recently and almost spontaneously, like there was this great cosmic reset of some kind. The scientists led by Rockefeller University's Mark Steckel and David Thaler of University of Basel, who were mining big DNA data amassed over the past 15 years, concluded that 90% of all animal species alive today, including humans, come from parents that all began giving birth at roughly the same time that our neocortex was activated, around 200,000 years ago. According to John Hofecker, an archaeologist at the University of Colorado, the neocortex was mysteriously switched on, charged, or awakened 75,000 years ago. In fact, there's archaeological evidence, he says, for the evolution of a human superbrain, meaning a collective brain of humanity that through a 100th monkey effect can share information, no later than 75,000 years ago. That's the window, 75 to 200,000 years ago. And whatever happened at that moment spurred a modern capacity for judgment, but also the capacity for novelty, invention, and the creation of artwork. In a TED Talk given in 2010, UCLA neuroscientist V.S. Ramachandran has observed that about 75,000 years ago, there was a sudden emergence and rapid spread of skills unique to human beings, like the use of tools and the use of fire, shelters, the use of language, plus the ability to read another person's mind and interpret their behavior or intentions. All of that happened basically at once, and no one knows how. No neuroscientist knows how. They speculate, but no one knows for sure. But whatever happened at that moment spurred our capacity for the creation and appreciation of art. Have you ever seen this before? This is the internet. So in 75,000 years, we've come from rubbing sticks and stones together to the creation of this artificially intelligent entity. We've gone from putting our hands on stones to creating new beings. And here in 2019, we are talking about dropping smart dust, neurolace, and neural dust, or smart dust, tiny particles that have a brain that wire us remotely to the internet. We're talking about activating a new layer of our neocortex. And this will change everything in our society. In fact, it is accepted as a foregone conclusion that within the next 10 years, you will merge with artificial intelligence and you will develop your new brain, a new layer of the neocortex. This is enormously significant in light of our study. So what occurred to make this happen? What activated our neocortex, and what is motivating our present time when we are now growing the neocortex, putting yet a new layer, a technological layer on it? Again, the hardware, the brain capacity was activated 200,000 years ago. Something happened 75 to 40,000 years ago. And whatever that was, seems to be happening again because we're now upgrading our neocortex. Neuroscientists say that it was cooking meat, psychedelic substances, climate change. All are involved with the activation of the neocortex. Carl Sagan says it was cosmic rays. But V.S. Ramachandran claims it was the sudden appearance of mirror neurons that allow us to imitate and emulate one another's actions that caused to the explosion of the neocortex. Ramachandran and researchers at UCLA found that mirror neuron cells in the human anterior cingulate, which normally fire when you poke a patient with a needle, they're called pain neurons, will also fire when the patient watches another patient being poked. Fortunately, an inner editor tells us to stop the pain because we're not actually being poked. This is a monkey see, monkey do effect. If we see someone performing an action, if it's on television or live in front of us, neurons in our own neocortex fire as if we ourselves are performing that action. This, as we will see, is the key to how sacred art can be used as a tool for ascension, and why it's so important that we have this conversation about the neocortex. As Ramachandran would say, the mirror neurons dissolve the barrier between self and others. If I see you in pain, part of me is in pain too. But I have an editor that says, William, the other person is actually experiencing the pain. You can empathize, but don't actually fire away and experience the pain yourself. However, the possibility exists that we can release that inner editor and sympathetically experience or empathetically experience what we are seeing. That is the key. So what we are saying here is that our brain capacity has within it a remarkable tool. And it was only in 1998 that neuroscientists discovered that new neurons are continually being generated in our adult brain, in the neocortex. The facility to, whether by creating new neuronal connections or reinforcing existing ones, is called brain plasticity. And over the last 20 years, neuroscientists have found the brain is more plastic and malleable than was long believed, that its circuitry can be changed by outside as well as inside events. And what we're going to develop here is this idea, unique to the work that Claire and I are doing, that you can actually use sacred art to change your brain. And if you can change your brain, you can change your life. A study was performed of musicians who have played 10,000 hours on their instruments and have shown, for instance, that the area of the brain that controls the movement of fingers has been considerably enhanced. Could mind training directed increasing mental states such as altruism, compassion, inner calm, and patience result in a similar magnitude? This is what new research programs are now trying to investigate, but as I'm going to show you, which the ancients firmly believed. Recent research carried out on the motor neurosystem in humans with a variety of techniques has shown that even the observation of static images of actions lead to action simulation in the brain of the observer. As you are looking at this painting by Hieronymus Bosch of the serpent handing an apple to Eve and Eve reaching out, your mirror neurons are firing as if you are actually the one receiving that fruit. And through the activation of the same brain regions, normally activated by execution of the observed actions, you then can be experiencing that same moment. They have discovered that the observation of pictures of a hand reaching to grasp an object or firmly holding it activates the motor representation of grasping in the observer's brain. You are mirroring what Eve is doing at this moment. You are taking that fruit in your own mind. Witnessing action activates the same neural networks as those used to perform these activities. This is how art can be used as a mirror, as a tool to show you the way to activate your brain and your body. I think this is what the Egyptians had in mind at Karnak, in this scene here where we see the Egyptian god Thoth, the bird-headed god Thoth, who is writing the name of the divine into a jar in this tree that is surrounding King Seti. King Seti is then being activated by the goddess Sekhmet. He is clearly receiving some kind of an attunement from this goddess. She is transforming him. And in fact, what we see here is that she holds in her hands the ancient Egyptian symbol for the hundreds of thousands of years. So does Horus, who's over on the right side and is also extending his hand. In this scene, you and I are both the transmitter and the receiver of what it is that is being exchanged between Seti and Sekhmet and Horus. And in fact, what is happening here is that Seti is receiving the secrets of the hundreds of thousands of years. He's receiving the secrets of ascension from Sekhmet and from Horus. He's learning to become an immortal being. He's actually learning the secrets of transmuting into his light being status. We know this because textual evidence from the term chesed, the name of the circlet that he's wearing, which means luminous, can be found in the pyramid text as well as in later funerary literature, where they denote the radiant appearance of the stellar gods and of Thoth and the deceased. And like the Nemes, another crown, the circlet appears in conjunction with the transfiguration of Osiris. Pardon me, I'm going to go back. So Seti is having his consciousness attuned so that he can become luminous and shining just like the divine beings. Let's talk about another example of a work of art being used as a healing tool. Let's talk about the story from the book of Exodus of Moses and the Israelites have just left Egypt. They're headed for the promised land. Suddenly, the Israelites are attacked by winged serpents who are biting them. And actually, there are researchers that believe that these winged serpents were actually sauruses, dinosaurs, living in ancient Israel that were carried over from a much more ancient time. And they were attacking the Israelites and biting them. So Moses prayed for the Israelites, and the Lord said to Moses, make, craft, manufacture, create a work of art, a fiery serpent, and set it on a pole, and everyone who is bitten by these winged serpents, when he sees it, this work of art, shall live. Now, what kind of a work of art can you create that will heal you from snake bite or the bite of any other reptile or other creature? When the Israelites looked at this sculpted metal serpent, a work of art called the Nehushtan, they were healed. The Nehushtan is a work of art, but it's also a device, a sign, a symbol, a seal, a tool, and an appliance. In this case, it transmits a healing vibration, and Moses was an artist who knew how to make this image that could transmit a healing vibration to the Israelites. The vibration came from elsewhere, was transmitted through the work of art, and healed the Israelites. In the New Testament, Jesus told Nicodemus that this work of art, this exact image, this Nehushtan, this device, is the secret to eternal life. That is extraordinary, because Jesus must have understood the power of art to heal and to transmit a healing vibration. Can God, or a God with a little g, a celestial being, inhabit a sculpture, a statue, a painting, or any work of art made by human hands? That's what we're asking here. A human made a work of art that was used as a conduit between the earthly realm and the divine realm. Can God transmit a holy vibration from this image, this work of art, to the human image, which is also a work of art? Can one work of art talk to another work of art? Can the presence of God be made manifest in the material world, or by definition, is it not allowed in our 3D world? One must carefully answer these questions, which, as a point of fact, are at the heart of all the world's religious traditions. And this is why this exploration is so important. Is it possible for we icons, we images of our Creator, we works of art, can use art as a conduit to a divine realm or to transmit a divine vibration through art. Is this possible? And if so, how is that possible? What kind of a universe do we live in when a work of art can become a healing device and even a portal into the divine realm? We must answer this question, as I said, because today we are creating images made in our images. We are creating humanoid robots, works of art, works of engineering, artificially created, artificially intelligent entities that are lifeless because they don't have a soul. They are exactly the same, in the same situation as Adam and Eve before the divine ones breathed a soul into them. Can we breathe spirit into our new creations, these robots? Estimates tell us there will be as many as 8 billion robots on our planet within 10 years to match the 9 billion humans who will be on the planet. We are in the process of augmenting our body through technology, through artificially intelligent technologies, meshing our flesh with circuitry, digital circuitry that wires us to the internet, gives us superhuman capabilities. We're talking about painting with extraordinary paint here. We're talking about a transformation of the human body that has not been seen since the time Adam and Eve were originally perfect beings of light in the Garden of Eden. Then they fell and found themselves in bodies of flesh. Now we are taking that artwork, the body of flesh, and augmenting it. We are transforming it with technology. We are artists. In fact, UK artist Jenny Lee has designed virtual digital skins that show, hey, the sky's the limit for how we can take this artistic creation and augment it and transform it. Why are we limiting ourselves to this appearance? Through nanotechnology and other technologies, we will be able to change the look of our face. If you want to be purple on Tuesday and green on Thursday, you can do that with the new skin that they're developing for humanity. The work of art is now augmenting the work of art and becoming something different. I want to turn the page now and go back to the ancient world and provide a timeline for you of art that has been used for several millennia, several thousand years, to transmit or act as a conduit for a higher or finer divine vibration. This is the first ever timeline or chronology such as this you will ever see. Claire and I have been researching this sacred art for 8 years, and we have never encountered such a timeline, and that is a valuable aspect of our presentation today. It's not going to encompass the entire timeline, but I'm going to skip you through history to show that the use of art as a conduit, specifically for ascension purposes, has been a well-established practice for millennia. We'll begin with the ancient Egyptian pyramid text, the resurrection text from Saqqara, 2500 BC approximately, which provide a first look at an amazing spiritual technology aimed at animating inanimate objects of art by transmitting a spirit into it or through it. The guys at Google, Ray Kurzweil's gang, who are developing this next human, will want to watch this presentation because their ultimate quest is to be able to transmit spirit into their artificially intelligent creations. At Saqqara, we learn of the opening of the mouth ceremony or ritual, which was the start of the dead king's funerary journey. It was practiced for over 2,000 years and appears in the Papyrus of Ani, one section of the famous Book of the Dead. And in this section, we see the statue, an image of the pharaoh, the deceased pharaoh, being reanimated, being reactivated for existence in a higher dimension or realm. The opening of the mouth was a ritual whose purpose was to invoke the spirit of a god into a statue of that god. Copy, paste, from one state of being into another. Its full title is The Opening of the Mouth and Eyes, and some consider it to be a reenactment of human birth events and was a way for the process to be duplicated in order to give the statue life. The point here is the ancient Egyptians firmly believed that inanimate objects could be vehicles for spirit, that spirit can be copied and pasted or cut and pasted from one vessel or container into another. In the ceremony, the statue's eyes are opened so it can see, and its mouth was opened so it can speak. And according to E.A. Wally Budge, the great Egyptologist, the first Egyptologist on the Book of the Dead, he said that the ceremony of the opening of the mouth is very ancient and probably dates from the end of the Neolithic period in Egypt. So the Egyptians possessed this spiritual technology whereby they could transmit a spirit from one container to another. And this is what we see in this scene from the tomb of King Tut, where he is the one who is going through this opening of the mouth initiation. And Isis is taking part. And look at the symbol of the squiggly line coming out of her hand. That has to symbolize frequency or vibration that she is transmitting to Tutankhamun. And here's the actual opening of the mouth ceremony, where the inanimate object is now being infused with the spirit of Tutankhamun. The practice of instilling a work of art may not have a work of art with spirit may not have actually originated with the Egyptians. The Sumerians were utilizing a virtually identical ceremony to that of the Egyptian opening of the mouth ceremony. From the end of the 3rd millennium BC onward, Mesopotamian gods were worshipped in their temples in corporeal manifestations as living anthropomorphic cult statues. Let that sink in for a moment, because what this is saying is that the statue of the god in a temple was equal to the physical presence of that god. Think about that. A lot of people understand the Sumerian stories of the Anunnaki and think of them as these celestial beings, these flesh and blood beings that came to earth, mated with the daughters of man and created hybrid beings. But there's equal evidence to say that they didn't show up in person. They sent a work of art. They caused an artist to sculpt an image, such as this one here of Inanna or Ishtar. And it could be imbued with the spirit of that being. Why send yourself to London on an airplane when you can just beam an image of yourself and imbue it with your spirit? That's essentially what this is saying. So this icon of Inanna or Ishtar is in fact Ishtar, according to this viewpoint, according to this spiritual practice. As the scholar Victor Avigor-Europe says, given the centrality of these statues, it may be assumed that a ritual was performed in which the finite physical image of the intangible God was transformed into the manufactured icon and transformed it into a living deity. And this, he says, was one of the most significant practice in Mesopotamian religion. We're looking at here another sculpture of an Anunnaki god, presumed to be Anu, one of the high gods, if not the high god of the Anunnaki hierarchy. This is in the British Museum. And what he tells us is that these statues were not just symbols of the god, they were a conduit between the human and the divine realms. There is no question, he says, that the cuneiform text from Mesopotamia, both historical and religious, referred to a statue of a god as being the god manifest on earth as him or herself. Let that sink in. The gods didn't need to come here in spaceships. They didn't need to come clear across the galaxy. They just needed to find a way to get an artist to create their image and then imbue that image through like an opening of the mouth ceremony with the divine spirit of the god, and the god was present. The god could see through that sculpture. I know it sounds bizarre, but this is the first example where we're to be instructed that a divine being can see you through their image. They can see you through their image. Think about what this means and what kind of universe it means that we actually live in. This is why the eye-to-eye images and sculptures are so profound to the Egyptians and the Sumerians, and why you only see the cutaway in Egypt very often. It's because of that eye-to-eye contact. The divine being can be present in that image and can interact with you through that image. Beautiful image of Anu in the British Museum. The merging of human and divine space was achieved through mouth cleansing, or what the Sumerians called mispai or maypai, and mouth opening or pitpai, rituals which were performed on the statue to make it into an image that properly represented the deity. So undoubtedly, these priests are receiving transmissions from the divine being, and he's saying, sculpt me this way, make me look like this, and then I will be properly represented. These rites of purification had to be performed on the cult statue before it could take up residence in the Holy of Holies, the holy place. In this example, also from the British Museum, the cuneiform text beneath the stele is divided into 15 passages, blending prose, poetic, and rhetorical elements, and tells of the fashioning of typical Mesopotamian inscriptions. It tells how Sippar and the Ebibar temple of Shamash, the sun god, had fallen into disrepair with the loss of the statue of the god. They lost the statue of the god, and they had no connection then with the sun god. This image that we're looking at, this cult image, temporarily was replaced with the solar disk that we see in this image. And the text that we're looking at here further described how a new figure of Shamash was found in an eastern part of the Euphrates, from which they had constructed a new statue of lapis lazuli and gold to restore the cult. So they lost the statue. They created this stele as a temporary, a holding place that could still transmit the vibration of Shamash. And then when they found the original, they were all happy again because the sun god was present once again in the divine place. Literally present is what they're saying. Both the Egyptian and the Sumerian rituals involve a statue of a god, and both involve charging or consecrating that statue, downloading into it the presence of that divine being so that the divine being could interact with humans and humans could interact with that divine being. And both involve opening the mouth of the statue. From Sumeria, we have this other example of King Judea. Academic art scholars look at this and say, okay, this is one of numerous representations of Judea, King Judea. But this one is very important because the statue first is made out of diorite, which is very difficult to work with. It's not an easy material for carving. And also that this figure is made in votive style. And unlike other votive statues, he's carrying something in his hands. By contextualizing the figure as a votive or a worship item, this addition of him holding something could either be taken as an offering to the gods or a gift from the gods. In other words, what they're saying is that looking at this statue of Judea, you are receiving the holy water that is coming out of his face. If you can get yourself into the right mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional space and become in unison, the God on the other side of the statue can transmit that holy water to you through this statue. This is what they're saying is the common practice in Mesopotamian religion in terms of worship of the Anunnaki. In both the Egyptian and Sumerian ceremonies, an object of art is created and consecrated, it's made holy, giving it life and transmitting the divine presence into it. The opening of the mouth and the mispai or maypai ceremonies tell us that gods were movable, they were transportable, and were imbued or infused with the divine essence or vibration that came from the stars and could be experienced through a work of art. They could be experienced through a work of art. The Hermetic literature among the Egyptians was concerned with conjuring spirits into art and statues and informed the oldest Hellenistic writings on the Greco-Babylonian astrology and on the newly developed practice of alchemy, says Jason Calavito. In a parallel tradition, Hermetic philosophy rationalized and systematized religious cult practices and offered the adept a means of personal ascension from the constraints of the physical being by conjuring the images into a work of art. This is me at Highclere Castle in England, near London. And the reason I'm showing you this picture is because that is what is known as a herm out on that pillar leading into the driveway going into Highclere Castle. A herm is a stone that is imbued with the essence of the god Hermes, a work of art used as a method of connecting us to Hermes, the great god of divine magic and alchemy. Every major religion has two components: written text about its respective deity and art. And throughout history, proponents or interpreters of the words only have been in perpetual conflict with advocates of the image. The struggles between the iconodules, those who serve images, and the iconoclasts, those who destroy images, is best exemplified in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, where art has been demonized by some, but upheld as a gateway to heaven by others. Some would say what I've been describing to you is New Age. They say, oh, it's New Age. It's not New Age. You can see it's millennia old. And what they mostly don't understand is that the prohibition against graven images has a historical backdrop of a coup, of a changing of the gods. Before the Ten Commandments came along and Moses gave us the second commandment that thou shalt not worship graven images, the Israelites utilized images of the divine feminine. They worshiped Hathor and Isis. They utilized the symbol of the serpent on a pole, the Nehushtan, as a divine healing method. Then after Moses receives the Ten Commandments, he smashes the graven images. He would no longer have anything to do with that work of art that he created. Where did this commandment come from? Why for millennia, for 2 millennia, are religious and spiritual people utilizing images, taught that they can use an image, they can see an image and connect with a God? Why all of a sudden is that practice severed? Who did that? Well, it was King Josiah who actually did it around 600 BC, but why? Is it because of this battle between those who say we're going to just worship God through words, or they who want to connect with the divine realm through images? I believe that that's exactly what's going on. We have to remember that Moses' story occurred during Egypt's 18th dynasty. This is the dynasty of Hatshepsut, of Tutmosis the third and fourth, and of Akhenaten, the heretic king, who is very similar to Moses. And in fact, Sigmund Freud believed that Moses and Akhenaten were in fact the same person. They did the same thing. They both introduced monotheism, or the worship of the one God, to their people. Akhenaten was also an artist. He introduced the idea of the Aten icon. The Aten, the one God, is symbolized by the sun disk emanating rays. However, Akhenaten said the Aten was not the sun. The Aten was the light that illuminated the sun. It was the universal spiritual presence. And what Akhenaten said was, scrap all those temples, rip the roofs off. Let's fire the bureaucracy of over 300, almost 360 Egyptian gods. All you need to connect with this divine presence, the Aten, is one of these tablets, like I'm showing you here. Akhenaten said, take this tablet home, put it on your altar. Let myself and my wife Nefertiti be conduits between you and the divine presence. All you need to do is to utilize this image and meditate on the image of the Aten in order to receive your own divine baptism, this spray of divine light coming from the Aten. I mean, think about what a revelation that is. Forget about all the temples. I mean, what he did was akin to a US president taking office and in his inaugural speech saying, I'm closing every church, synagogue, and mosque in America. You will never go into those buildings again because you don't need them. You don't need the priest, and you don't need their words. You don't need any of that. All you need is this image. And if you can contemplate, meditate, and reflect on this image, you can receive a transmission of the divine vibration through this piece of art. No wonder they put in a commandment against using images or worshiping idols. It's because the priests were out of a job. And the only way they were going to get back into their job was to ban the use of images as a spiritual practice, which is what they did. So what we're talking about here is this spiritual practice that began with the Sumerians, comes into the Egyptian tradition, and in the 18th dynasty, time of Akhenaten, it reaches full flower. You don't need temples anymore. Forget the priests. The icon can convey the message of the deities. It substitutes. It can be utilized as in place of the Attaining. The Attaining is present in this image. And if you are meditating on this image, you have the power to receive the protection and divine sanction that Akhenaten is creating for you through this image. Consequently, Akhenaten's radical new theology, the religion of light, introduced art deemed not only revolutionary, but also immensely innovative and mysterious. Once again, how can an image, an icon, a work of art be used as a conduit to a divine presence? This is what the Babylonians were teaching, that the cult image, temporarily replaced with the solar disk, is equal to the presence of the sun god in the temple. Maybe Akhenaten was aware of this from Sumerian and Babylonian practices. Art historians tell us that in these icons, again, which are about this size, many of them that exist today, most of them were destroyed when the Egyptian military attempted to completely erase all traces of the existence of Akhenaten and his family, including Nefertiti and Tutankhamun, his son. They were able to recover a few of these tablets, and they're about 2.5, 3 feet tall, some of them are larger. But these would be placed on an altar in a private home. And art historians tell us that the full frontal view of this panel allowed the onlooker to perceive the disc, the Attaining, in its greatest potential effectiveness. So again, it's that full frontal view, that eye-on view. And here we have Akhenaten offering the blue lotus to the Attaining disc and inhaling the key of life that is being transmitted from the Attaining disc. We see the same thing happening in this incredible image here from that's now in the Berlin Museum, but which would have been on an altar in a private home. And the person who owned it, the family that owned it, would have used this as a way of connecting with the Attaining through the image of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. And in fact, in this image, we profoundly see that actually Nefertiti appears to have a direct connect. There's no key of life at the end of the ray coming from the Attaining. It's going straight into her pineal gland, right into her third eye. She is inhaling that key of life, just like Akhenaten's doing. He's inhaling the key, and he's transmitting it to his daughter through the breath. She is becoming a living image, just like happened with Adam and Eve. She's pointing to a 3-pronged glyph. The glyph that she is pointing to is the ancient Egyptian hieroglyph for beings of light, wise instructed folk, the Aku, the Akut. As Graham Hancock and Robert Bauval explain in their book, The Message of the Sphinx, the hieroglyphs of Aku can also mean transfigured beings, shining ones, shining beings. So what we have here is Akhenaten's daughter receiving the rays of the Attaining through this work of art, and then being instructed or initiated into understanding of the beings of light, the wise instructed folk. Look at this baptism scene of Jesus from 1400 years later. John the Baptist is transmitting the holy vibration symbolized by the triple rays, extending from an open portal or gateway in heaven through which a dove descends. He is transmitting that divine vibration into the crown chakra of Jesus. He's activating him. Before this moment, Jesus is just the guy from Nazareth or in the Galilee. After this, he begins to perform the miracles. John the Baptist has changed Jesus' consciousness. He has awakened his healing capability, after which he begins to perform the miracles. We'll come back to that in just a moment. In ancient Egypt, images of the divine and the divine beings were believed to be magically active, dynamic, alive, and were capable of transmitting or impressing or imprinting holy actions upon the viewer. They were supposed to make permanent the action shown being performed. So as long as the Pharaoh is anointing the god in this scene on earth, that is also occurring in the world of the gods. They are entwined, entangled is actually the word we use these days. They are quantumly entangled. This is the key component, again, of the ancient Egyptian religion. The image can be used as a transmitter of a holy vibration. What do you notice here is that the same Pharaoh, King Seti, now has his hands and his face chipped off. Who did this and why? The answer is the early Christians did it. The reason why they did it was to sever the connection between the earthly realm and the divine realm. They knew of the power of the image, that it could be activated and used as a conduit between the divine and the earthly realm. And this is exactly what we see on the wall at the Temple of Karnak. Another example from Abydos in Egypt, where we see King Seti and Isis both anointing the image, the head actually, of the god Osiris. Their hands, their face, and their feet have all been chopped off in order to sever their connection from this antenna-looking piece of art. They're no longer seen anointing it. They're no longer receiving the anointing or the vibration that assuredly was coming from this device that represented the god Osiris. It was actually his sign or his symbol. Seti I, in fact, erected this symbol in the Chapel of Eternity, which was built to house the image of his father. So that's what this device is. It's actually the image of his father. And furthermore, this chapel and this image is a place where his father's ka, or divine spiritual body, could alight. This makes perfect sense in what we've been talking about. The art itself is a conduit through which Seti's ka could come and go through that image. This relief of the same image we just saw a moment ago, or in the previous slide, is from the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, where I took this picture. The finely cut chapel reliefs were cut from the walls of the Temple of Ramses I at Abydos and presented by J.P. Morgan in 1911 to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And here we see it once again, where Seti is now offering fruit to the image of his father, the image through which his spiritual, this is Seti offering the image, or fruit to the image through which he can come and go from the earthly realm into the divine realm. Herbert Wenlock was the Metropolitan Museum of Art's great expert on this image. And in one of his papers about it for the Met, he says it's a species of idol from antiquity in which the god had the ability or was imbued with the god's personality, or was even a manifestation of the very God himself, for the words that issue from it are the actual words of Osiris. Its significance and even its origin are both shrouded in almost complete mystery. So here is Herbert Wenlock, the Met's great expert in the early 20th century, saying this image housed the personality of Osiris and was also, from what we saw a moment ago, a conduit through which Seti could come and go, or his divine spirit could come and go between the earth plane and the celestial realms. It is actually, Osiris is actually present in this image. And as he says, its significance and even its origin are shrouded in almost complete mystery. Well, this is an extraordinary example of what we're talking about here. The use of an image as a conduit, and also an image as a portal between the earth plane and the divine realm. Now, what's incredible about this image of Osiris is that the hieroglyph for this image contains a serpent on a pole. That is exactly the symbolism of the artwork that Moses made that was used to transmit the divine vibration of Yahweh that healed the Israelites. And I'm on record as the only researcher. I'm not an Egyptologist. They don't say this. They've never said this, but I can prove it. That Moses was, when he was trained in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, as the book of Acts says, was trained at Abydos. In order to prove it, you have to come to Abydos with me. And I will take you into the Osiris Chapel, and I will take you into several corridors that indisputably prove that the story of Moses, especially turning a rod into a serpent and back into a rod, and creating a Nehushtan, because that's what this Osiris image is, took place at Abydos, or Moses learned how to make the winged serpent image, the Nehushtan, at Abydos. And the Nehushtan of the Israelites that transmitted the holy vibration is the same as the head of Osiris that transmitted the holy vibration of Osiris at Abydos. And here's my photo of it on the wall at the Temple of Seti at Abydos. Again, we're told it is the sign and seal and symbol of Osiris. It represents Osiris, and it's actually the Egyptian symbol for the hope for the afterlife as well. But it is a further example that this symbolism of the serpent on a pole is a healing device, and that wisdom is somehow key and central ultimately to our ascension. Again, Jesus said that the serpent on a pole, the Nehushtan of the Israelites, and the Osiris device of the Egyptians is the secret of eternal life. In the book of John, he's talking with Nicodemus about the secrets of ascension. And he tells them that as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believeth in him should not perish, but will have eternal life. It could be argued that what Jesus is saying is that he who understands this work of art can receive the divine vibration from Christ, and you will have eternal life as a result. It's clear to me, and I hope it's clear to you, that the Nehushtan of Moses, the serpent on a pole that Jesus references as the key to eternal life, and the Osiris device are all the same thing. They're all the same thing. And they do the same thing. They are conduits, a piece of art that is a conduit between the earth realm and the celestial realms. After Jesus has this conversation with Nicodemus about the secret of eternal life, talks about putting the serpent on a pole, he is baptized by John the Baptist. That comes next. And this is, again, in what we see here in Del Vecchio's rendering with assistance from Leonardo, as his crown chakra is open. This spray of divine light enters into his crown chakra, activating angels standing nearby, and they are there to offer to him a cloak or a garment that symbolizes his embodiment of this divine vibration. Immediately after the baptism, Jesus performs the transfiguration, where he metamorphoses, he transforms into a being of light. He puts on that cloak of light and demonstrates to the disciples his ability now to embody this divine light. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. And suddenly, Moses and Elijah were beside him. What he is wearing is that same garment of light, that celestial garment of light, of heavenly light, that Adam and Eve originally wore in the Garden of Eden. Jesus is referred to as the second Adam in Christianity. His mission is about showing wayward humanity how to return to our original state of perfection by acquiring this robe of light, this robe of sanctity, robe of glory, shining garment, the garment of light that gives us authority, jurisdiction, liberty, power, the right to act, ability, privilege, capacity, and strength. The question is, how do we receive this divine cloak, or the vibration that enables us to make that cloak ourselves? In Christianity, For the first 4 centuries of its existence, this was done through images, through panel icons, especially icons of the Transfiguration, in which Jesus is portrayed morphing into light. Christianity is founded on the premise that Christ is God incarnate. Paul said that Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge, is the image of the invisible God. If Christ is an image of God, he must then reflect God or something of God. Can Christ as an image then be imaged himself? Can this image, as we have established occurred in Mesopotamia and Egypt, then transmit Christ to us? Can we receive the Christ vibration through the image? Or is this asking if a beam of light, a beam of sunlight reflected on water can somehow leap from the water and take on life? The answer is yes, according to the early Christian teaching of the icon makers. Then an icon can be used as a conduit. It is a sacred image that is believed to be charged with spiritual power, exactly like we saw in Babylon and Egypt. It can also transmit spiritual power. More, an icon is a living image that functions as a portal or gateway, and it's a two-way mirror and method of communication with the divine realms. Jesus is busy, so he sends an image. And he is physically present then in that image, according to the belief of these icon makers. Now, the iconoclasts, the iconoclasts, who believe in the word only, are like, that's not happening. That is not happening. And they ultimately then burned every icon they could get their hands on of Jesus transfiguring into light. What a travesty in human history. How different could our world be if we knew that anyone can connect with the Christ vibration through an image? You don't need a pope, a priest, a politician, or a pimp, to quote Carlos Santana. You just need an image. The image, the Gnostics taught, will show you the way. You can enter the divine realm and commune with the Christ vibration through the image. So they created icons that would enable a visceral encounter with a holy being, or to make present the spiritual energy of Christ. These icons are a form of visual alchemy that can help us in our transformation. How? The circuitry is already there. The mirror neurons. Remember, when you're looking at this image of Christ transfiguring into a being of light, a part of you is following him. A part of you is doing the same thing, but you've got an editor that says, oh, William, don't go full light body here because you'll disappear and people won't be able to finish their webinar, right? But what if we could find a way to unlock that editor, to allow it to say, we already have the neurocircuitry, we have the DNA, we have everything we need to follow Jesus in his metamorphosis, his transfiguration. What do we lack? Well, we've got the image. What we need then is the belief. We need the belief that says that we can do that. Because these images, we are assured by icon makers, are mirrors. They are sacred mirrors. As you contemplate, meditate, and reflect on this image, Jesus is actually present on your computer screen at this moment. You are in eye-to-eye contact with him. Moses and Elijah are also present. And as you begin to be absorbed into the image and receive its light, a part of you is transfiguring. Through the principle of neuroplasticity, maybe if you get 10,000 hours into this, your brain's going to change. I'm probably about 6,000 hours into staring at images like this over these past 8-10 years. They're constantly on my desktop. They're always on my phone. They're always in my awareness. I'm always seeking them, collecting them, trying to line up with this vibration through the image. Claire and I have gone about collecting as many examples of these as we can in hopes that we get the one that's just right for you, that will awaken your connection. The icon makers held it through prayer, In meditation, believers could actually come to perceive the same divine light that shone around Jesus during his transfiguration and become like him through a mystic union made through the image. That is extraordinary. It's stunningly beautiful. It's so elegant. It's ancient. As we have established, it goes back to Babylon and also to Egypt, where that was common practice. But then the second commandment came along and said, don't use the image, don't pay attention to all these Christian images. No, Jesus, he can't talk to you through the image. He can only talk to you through the book. The materials of the transfiguration icon became a channel. And to Orthodox Christians, these images are a medium through which the whole may be approached and grace channeled like a two-way mirror. You are entering to the divine realm, and the divine realm is entering into your consciousness through these images. A friend of mine, I've known him for, 30 years now, Dr. Mario Martinez. He's a Nashville-based psychologist, or lived here at one time, actually. He's moved away. Studied the stigmatics for the Vatican back in the 80s. He went around the world on the Vatican's dime studying people who claimed that they were reading books about the crucifixion and displaying the marks of the stigmata, blood on the hands, all the 5 wounds of the crucifixion. And what Dr. Martinez has shown is that the medieval stigmatics showed wounds on the palms of their hands because all the paintings, which were based on cultural beliefs, showed Jesus's wounds on the palm. These people are looking at these paintings and go, oh, so the wound was in the palm. Then scientists discovered that the Roman crucifixion specialists bypassed the main artery and hit a nerve in the wrist to ensure maximum agony. Now today, modern stigmatics show the wounds in the wrist because of cultural beliefs. What Dr. Martinez says is, where the mind goes, the biology follows. Where the mind goes, the biology follows. That is the principle of neuroplasticity. And it is also the principle of how sacred art can be used as a tool for ascension. So is it possible that we icons, we works of art, can use art as a conduit between our biological selves and our light being selves? Yes. By looking at art depicting divinity and ascended beings, can we become divine and ascend? Yes. Absolutely. That is what this is saying, emphatically. And because humans are made in the perfect image of God, we have the spiritual capacity to participate in or mirror Jesus' divine glory as image bearers and reactivate our light bodies. The Bible is very clear and specific about this teaching. 1 Corinthians, Paul expresses this as follows. He says, it is sown a physical body, but it's raised a spiritual body. If there's a physical body, there's also a spiritual body. We talked about this duality earlier. But if it's not the spiritual, which is first, but the physical, then the spiritual. The first man was from earth, he says, a man of dust. The second man is from heaven. And just as we have borne the image of the man of dust, the man of clay, this artwork, we shall also bear the image of the man of heaven. And we can bear the image of the man of heaven by understanding this symbolism of the serpent on a pole, by understanding that this, in fact, is the key to eternal life. And it's not the serpent on a pole necessarily that is the key. It's what it symbolizes, that a work of art can be used as a conduit between the earth and the divine realm. And that's why one of my most prized possessions is this walking stick. Can you see? I got it, it was given to me at Karnak Temple on a recent trip in Egypt. It's actually a serpent coiled around the rod here, exactly like what we see Jesus holding here. It gives me great comfort to put it on the floor here and just to put my chin on the top of the serpent, to contemplate that what we're looking at here is the key to ascension. The serpent on a pole represents the idea that art is a conduit between the earthly and the divine. And when Jesus says, lift that serpent, he's talking about awakening our consciousness to understand the nature of our universe and the nature of our consciousness, that art can be used as a conduit between earth and heaven. According to Buddhism, each of us holds within us an exhaustless source of compassion and wisdom. all we need to connect with the divine in our essential nature is to recognize that our divine self has been covered over by negative emotions and false perceptions. When did the illusion of separateness begin? Well, when our neocortex was activated. Before that, we were one with all that is. And this is what we're trying to get back to, is that state. The second we veiled our pure Buddha or Christ nature with a fundamental mistake, we were separate. And that mistake is the notion of I. When I think of myself as separate from all that is, I am in my fallen state, actually. My consciousness falls. So when we fail to recognize self-recognition, we call it I. And when we fail to recognize our own reflection, we call it the object. That is the Buddhist genesis of the word samsara, this world of suffering and illusion that we live in. There's no need for a historical in the beginning. Samsara is happening every second. And the Buddhists teach that there's many ways to remind ourselves of our true nature. Among them are meditation, prayers, recitation of mantras, construction of inspiring places, visiting sacred places like the tours Claire and I lead. All of these are apropos or important tools for our ascension. But there's one tool in particular that the Buddhists say that will enable us to transcend samsara. And they call it ekagrata in the yoga tradition, a one-pointedness meditation on sacred images is the way to overcome samsara. And when he places himself before a sacred image, the task of the Hindu devotee is to recognize the illusory division between worshiper and the worshipped, himself and his God, and to transcend it. That separateness is an illusion. And overcoming this is achieved in a moment of samadhi, when the image and the beholder's consciousness unite, writes Heinrich Zimmer. And the goal of all sacred tradition is reached. The believer experiences himself as divine. We ascend from this world into the divine realm by uniting with the image, but more importantly, the presence of the divine being in that image. A representation of the Buddha is not a heathen image. It's not a false idol. It's not even a piece of art. It's a revelation, according to Buddhists, a demonstration of ultimate truth. And this is what we're trying to get at here, how art can take us to that ultimate truth. The Buddha image is a container for his wisdom. It's actually an empty container until it's consecrated with authentic presence. This is exactly what the Sumerians and the Egyptians and the early Christians understood about their icons and their artwork. It's an empty container until it's made holy with the authentic presence of that divine being. It's called empowerment. The wisdom essence of the Buddha is directed into the image, empowering it. Spirit is taken from one place, copied, cut, and pasted, and put into another container. It's beyond the power, energy, or vibration of the Buddha. It is his essence. Buddha is present in that image when it's made holy. And since we can only connect with it through form, it has to be directed into a representation of the Buddha. The Buddha's presence couldn't go into a cup. It has to go into an image, a representation of the Buddha. The consecration ceremony bestows presence like putting software in a computer. This is what we saw in the opening of the Mount ceremony in Egypt and again, Babylonia. First, the statue is filled with spiritual substances, mantras, relics. Then the image is visualized as empty, as having disappeared into its essential nature. Then it's brought back. From the emptiness, it arises purified as a Buddha. Then the empowerment or authentic wisdom being is invoked and merges with the visualized form of the Buddha, which dissolves into the image, filling it with authentic presences. Buddha is now present in that image. The image is then the Buddha. And in reality, there's no difference between the image and the Buddha. This is the lost art of ascension we're talking about, of living beings assisting us in living ascension by connecting with sacred art. The Buddhists teach that when we single-mindedly contemplate on the magnificence of the Buddha's image, we're practicing ekagrata, or one-pointed focus on the Buddha's form. And when we do this repeatedly over time, maybe for 5,000 hours, 10,000 hours, the image of the Buddha stays constantly in our mind. It's imprinted on our brain changes, our body begins to change, and now we attain the purity of one-pointedness. We become the Buddha. We become the Christ. Ekagrata is a practice that leads to a state of being. And this is a major practice that takes us out of the samsaric world and into the realm of the divine and heavenly beings. The Tibetans call it merit. They call the practice of ekagrata and utilizing sacred art merit. Took this photo at the Rubin Museum in Manhattan, the Tibetan museum, where it says that some objects are commissioned to ensure fortunate rebirth in the next life. And that, in fact, when a person is creating this, commissioning, creating, dedicating, and utilizing these works of art, they are practicing merit. They are gaining merit points in the afterlife. And this is a photo of Claire in a Tibetan exhibit practicing merit. She is linking with the divine beings of the Buddhist tradition. Here's another example from this same exhibit. This is a tanka that is in the Newark Museum. I was traveling around America a couple years ago, and it came to Nashville, where Claire and I experienced this incredible exhibit of artwork and also took these photos. And what we see here is the Diamond World Mandala. It's actually the Buddha Vairocana, the shining one, who is portrayed in the center of the mandala. And as we read along here, it talks about how the ritual use of this painting with its twin nearby provides portals of interaction between participants and these assembled deities. Imagine the most powerful members of the pantheon as your captive audience. Wait a minute. What are we talking about here? Aren't we talking about what we've been talking about for the past hour? That the painting is a portal. It's a conduit between us and the divine realm. And that, in fact, through these portals, these divine beings are present. We are looking at the Vairocana Buddha, and he's looking at us. How is that possible? What kind of a universe do we live in when the Buddha of infinite light can transmit something to us through a painting, and how he can be present in our space right now through this image? I have an explanation, which I'm going to put forth momentarily. In Korea, the paintings in their shamans, the Mansin shrine, are animated images, objects entered by the gods when the shaman invites them in, and who operate through the painting and allow the shaman to enter the divine realm. This is just mind-blowing to me. And I've uttered this statement 100 times in different places around the world, and it never fails. Just completely blow the shutters open in my mind. That in fact, the Buddha is at this very instant beaming a divine vibration to me and to you through that image. And that the shaman can enter into the pure land of the Buddha through this image. In fact, the Koreans teach that the paintings are a divine prosthesis. They're an avatar, they're an augmentation, and are viewed as an extension of the God's ability to move in and engage in the mortal world. These are avatars. Of course they can do this. They're not limited by the physics of this world and the limited thoughts of human beings. They can enter into a painting and transmit a vibration to you and make themselves present to you through the image. The God who is otherwise invisible becomes visible in the material form and location through the medium of the painting. Buddha doesn't need a flying saucer to cross or to traverse the universe. Christ doesn't need it. The Anunnaki never needed rocket ships or spaceships. They sent their images Or they send a vibration, a communication to an artist who created an image with an understanding that in certain circumstances that God could be present in that image, perhaps even in all circumstances. So the Buddha, we're mirroring him, is present at this moment, bringing to us a message of peace and hope. Interaction for the Buddhists with sacred images is a form of dreaming, rehearsal for what is to come, and a way to engage with the divine ones. And what a beautiful and stunningly elegant way for a teaching to be transmitted through an image. It's a form of dreaming and rehearsal. So as we are contemplating and meditating and reflecting on these images, we're actually engaging with our future selves, our true selves. These Hindu statues or photos that I took in the Asian Museum in San Francisco, once installed with temples, were considered, when activated, to embody the divine presence. So we've seen this in Mesopotamia, Egypt, Babylon, early Christianity, Korea, the Buddhist tradition, and of course now the Hindu tradition. Worshippers were graced by the divine presence of the image merely by seeing the image, and at the same time by presenting themselves to be seen by the divine. That is what the card in the Asian Museum in San Francisco says. That as we are looking at this image, we are presenting ourselves to be seen by the divine being, by Vishnu or whatever other avatar we're looking at. In their original settings, many images were adorned with fine cloths, jewels, garlands, and sacred powders. In worship, they were cared for and honored with the presentation of such items as food, incense, and flowers as befitting royal or honored guests. The Egyptians did the same thing with their false doors, because they weren't false doors. They were actually portals or gateways to the divine realm, works of art that functioned as conduits between earth and heaven. Did I catch you dreaming, even believing you were alive? Pull back the curtain, see how the smallest things collide just to make us in a dream for white light. Love that song called Running by The Lonely Wild. Did I catch you dreaming? That's what the Buddha's asking here. Are you awakening your consciousness? Are you utilizing the power of your neocortex, of neuroplasticity, to look at an image for 1,000 hours, a couple thousand hours, and alter your brain so that you match that of the Buddha or the Christ? According to Hindu Buddhist thought, all that we behold around us is Maya, illusion. Here's how this works. This three-dimensional cube looks like a cube, but it's actually 12 lines projected onto your computer screen that are brought to life in your imagination as a cube. One that keeps flipping back and forth, showing us the duality of this world. Every moment of our lives, every single second, we are bringing all this out here to life in our imagination. We're told in the holographic nature of our universe and this simulated reality that we live in, that all of this is brought to life by our imagination. So of course, we can use images to come in from outside the cube. It's flipping back and forth, as I said, and this represents the duality of light and dark, love and fear. The only two choices that we make when we see everyone and everything. We're going to either put love into that situation or person or fear. In the universal law, the golden rule says what we get out is what we get back. But what the cube demonstrates is that that division, that judgment, is an illusion. It's actually all just one cube. There's no yes or no, light, dark, love, or fear about it. It's all the same energy, and we choose through our judgment, through our neocortex, what we're going to put into it. This glass of water is a collection of paint, and glass, and water, H2O, but to a quantum physicist, it's energy in motion. A bunch of empty space. It's all brought to life in my imagination. And it's refreshing. Just like everything else that we see around here, it's all brought to life. And once we understand that, we can see how the three-dimensional cube becomes the core of the fourth-dimensional hypercube, and that there are, in fact, portals and gateways in our imagination leading into other dimensions. where we can interact with these divine beings. This is probably my number one mind-blowing painting I've ever encountered. It's in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It shows the Buddha of infinite light descending from the celestial realms, from the pure land of the Buddhas. He's descending with his entourage, all bodhisattvas, beings of light and love who are riding upon clouds, the symbol of their ascension vehicles and their ascended status. They're cloud riders. And what we see is that the Buddha of infinite light is a radiant being of light. This tanka is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. And the placard, the sign beside this states this about this painting. It says, like many of the works of art created to represent the Pure Land belief in salvation through faith, welcoming descent paintings like this were indispensable religious furnishings at the time of death. Such paintings depict the scene in which the Amitabha Buddha, the Buddha of infinite light, and his attendants descend from heaven to take a believer back to the Western paradise on a lotus throne, his ascension vehicle. The scrolls were often hung by the bedside of the dying to ensure the prospect of rebirth in paradise. Sometimes, silken cords were attached to Buddha's hand, offering the dying physical assistance during the journey to paradise. That makes total sense in the context of what we've been talking about. But still, how can a painting be a portal? Well, we've explained that. In our quantum universe, in our holographic universe, the painting is a portal that these divine beings can use in order to bring you from the physical realm into the immortal realm. And the fact that they attach silken cords to the painting is just absolutely mind-boggling to me. If we were in a Tibetan monastery anytime in the past 1,000 years, we might have encountered an image such as this. It's called the Path of Calm Abiding. It's an open eye meditation. We see a gray elephant making its way up a serpentine pathway going up to a rainbow bridge. The Buddhists would use this as an open eye meditation to contemplate, meditate, and reflect on how we have to purify our mind in order to enter into the pure realms. As we see the elephant going up the pathway here, it encounters various obstacles and challenges. And as it overcomes those obstacles and challenges, it gradually goes from being gray into a pink elephant until it gets up to the top of the image where it sees the rainbow bridge that's opened up into the pure land. And the pink elephant is now coming and going, having acquired the ability to phase back and forth at will between the physical realm or the celestial realm and the earthly realm, if that is the greatest method to develop or to deliver the greatest amount of compassion. The idea here is that the painting is a guide for our consciousness once again. And in Buddhist art, we see this theme over and over again of the stairway to heaven and of enlightened beings descending through portals and gateways. The painting is the portal or gateway. The painting is the portal or gateway itself. And through the painting, the Amitabha Buddha, the Buddha of infinite light, is descending the stairway to heaven and assisting us in our transformation. This is the message of these incredible Buddhist tankas that feature ascended beings like Padmasambhava, who taught the rainbow light body teaching in the 8th century in Tibet, or came to Tibet from India to teach it. These images always emphasize this idea that our true nature is a rainbow light body being, a glorious being of light, and that, in fact, we are always connected to the divine or celestial realms through our light body. So actually, this brings up a very important point, that we can argue that it is not our physical brain that is actually interacting with these images. It's our divine self, it's our light being self that is absorbing the light of these images and using that light to begin to transmute our physical body into its original divine status. Just as light is not only a wave, but is also a particle, that's the quantum duality of light, our body also has this dualistic aspect. What is a painting but a collection of dots or particles that make a wave? That's the quantum nature of painting and art. So an image can interact with an image through this quantum portal that is created in our consciousness. If you view the human being as a soul, you experience the wave-like spirit body and will tend towards a mystical religious point of view. But to see the full human body, the full human being, you must flip back and forth between these points of view until you're able to experience that human beings are both particle-like physical bodies and wave-like energy bodies, exactly as told in the Genesis story. We're sown as a physical body, raised as a spiritual body. That's what Paul taught as well. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. And we think that that image is of our physical body. It's not. It's of our metaphysical light body. And that is what is, I believe, encoded within this incredible painting of Jesus as a craftsman, as a carpenter, in fact, utilizing his compass and scales. What we see in this painting from the 14th century is extraordinary. We see an image of Christ or Jesus fashioning a human being that is actually matches what we today call a fractal, a specific fractal, in fact, the Mandelbrot set. And this is a very key teaching for us to grasp a hold of. In 1980, Dr. Benoit Mandelbrot discovered the infinitely complex geometrical shape called the Mandelbrot set, using a very simple equation with computers and graphics. In the 1970s and 80s, mathematicians working in an area called dynamical systems made use of the ever-advancing computing power to draw computer images of the objects they were working on. What they saw blew their minds. Fractal-like structures whose beauty and complexity is rivaled only by nature itself. In fact, nature itself is considered to be fractal in nature. And at the heart of these fractals lays the Mandelbrot set. It's generated by what's called iteration, which means to repeat a process over and over again. It's a set of numbers, and from those numbers you can generate pictures. And the pictures are infinitely complicated. At every level of magnification, the image repeats itself into infinity. Now think about this in the context that we are made in the image of God. We are fractals of God. In fact, the Mandelbrot set is a mathematical icon that has been called the thumbprint of God. The metaphysical message of that is that we are connected always with our Creator because we are fractal images of our Creator. And as the Mandelbrot set demonstrates, at every level of magnification, the pattern is exactly the same. No matter how deep you go into it, the image remains the same. And that is the metaphysical teaching here of the light body, that when we're made in the image of the Creator, it's not this flesh and blood form that we're talking about. It is our fractal-like light body form. And the key about the Mandelbrot set is that if the programmer looks at the Mandelbrot set and wants to change some tiny detail, maybe make one of the bumps go away, they can't do it without getting back to the original equation and changing it. But if they do that, they change everything. They tear the universe down and build another one from scratch. So within the Mandelbrot set, we see the richness of our unity and also the richness of our individuality. We are, in effect, baby Mandelbrot sets, which is stunning because look at this image here of the Akhenaten Buddha from the 12th century. The Buddha is meditating in a shape that is, in my opinion, identical to the Mandelbrot set, or the human form is identical to the Mandelbrot set. I didn't even do any manipulation of this. I just took a Mandelbrot set fractal and inserted or superimposed it over the meditating Buddha, and it's a perfect match. It once again refers us to this idea that we are made in the image of God, in the light being image of God. In fact, A clever mathematician noticed this similarity between the Mandelbrot set and the meditating Buddha and decided to alter the Mandelbrot set equation and came up with what's called the Buddhabrot, a rendering technique of the Mandelbrot set that represents in more detail the classical depictions of Buddha seated in a meditation pose with his forehead marked in traditional top knot. Absolutely stunning. So from this, I've deduced the idea that our rainbow light body, as the Buddhists say, is our true nature. And when it says we're made in the image of God, this is the image that we're talking about. And the image within us can link with or connect with the image of God through the light body. We see this idea of this fractal-like aspect of ourselves rendered in Buddhist art, and we are intrigued, to say the least, by its correspondence with the idea that all the elements of our body come from supernovas, which are stars that resurrected into another form, leaving behind the shell of their material, that then fans out into the galaxy and became the materials out of which our bodies are made. Look at the correspondence between the supernova, the rainbow-like quality of the supernova, the exploding star, and the rainbow-like, or the rainbow quality of the human who is transformed into a star being. Matches that Hermetic adage, as above, so below, as within, so without, actually precisely. Crossing back to Egypt, we see that Osiris and his resurrected body, the color, the energy, the intent matches that of the rainbow light body, such that we can say that the images of the resurrected Osiris clearly point to his existence in a new state of being, matching that of the rainbow light body. Jesus in his resurrected form also attained this extraordinary state of being. In fact, the Gospel of Philip says that the Lord rose from the dead. He became as he was, but now his body was perfect, meaning whole, wholly, complete, compassionate, and a being of light. He goes on to say that Jesus possessed flesh, but this was true flesh. Our flesh isn't true. Ours is only an image of the true. Ours is only an image of the true. Our physical flesh and blood body is not our true self. Our light body self, our rainbow light body, is our true self. And here we see the direct correspondence between the images of Jesus and his rainbow or glory body and that of the Tibetan rainbow light body. They're a perfect match because it's the same state of being. For Buddhists, the ultimate goal of spiritual practice is to awaken to this true nature. This is ascension. This is what ascension is. Ascension doesn't mean you're going to suddenly go off and live in some other dimension somewhere. It means you're going to live more and more from your true nature, which is the nature of the fully enlightened Buddha. It means you're going to live from the perspective of your light body. It means you're going to connect with your rainbow light body. And the way you do that is through sacred art. This is the lost art of living ascension. By contemplating, meditating, and reflecting on these images, as the Buddhists teach, we become the Buddha. We become rainbow light beings by interacting with the image. It feeds our light body. So whether you prefer images of Osiris, images of Christ and his resurrection body, or Padmasambhava, it makes no difference, because all of these traditions teach exactly the same thing. These divine beings can transmit their vibration through the image. And especially the eye-to-eye, full facial frontal contact are the ones you want to seek. This is John Van Eyck's image of the resurrected Jesus. It's in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, and I've used it for years as an open-eye meditation tool to mirror what Jesus is doing. In fact, to receive that divine light that he is transmitting through that image. To achieve illumination or experience Buddha nature, we must meditate on the blue pearl, the jewel in the heart of the golden lotus, is what the Buddhists teach. This is the meaning of Om Mani Padme Hum, the Buddhist mantra that calls down divine blessings. So if you're looking for a practice, in addition to utilizing these images, chant Om Mani Padme Hum, because it will call in those divine blessings. The Buddhists teach that through regular and prolonged meditation and focus on the blue pearl or images of the blue pearl, which is what we see here, one gradually experiences their true nature. It represents the attainment of the rainbow light body, which is interesting because talking about practices again, the art of living ascension, what can you do in your daily life and practice that can connect you with these beings, is you can chant Om Mani Padme Hum. Om is the sound or vibration of the universe. Ma removes the attachment to jealousy and establishes ethics. Ni removes the attachment to desire and establishes patience. Pad establishes perseverance. Me establishes concentration. And Hum removes the attachment to hatred and establishes wisdom. These are the 6 paramitas or perfections of the Buddhist tradition. So in this way, recitation of the mantra helps achieve perfection in these 6 practices, from generosity to wisdom. Beyond that, it is said that all of the teachings of the Buddha are contained in this mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. And Tibetan Buddhists believe that saying the mantra, this prayer, out loud or silently to oneself invokes the powerful and benevolent attention of the Buddha. But viewing the written form of the mantra is said to have the same effect. And it's often carved into stones and placed where people can see them. This is our practice. This is the art, the lost art of living ascension, utilizing these images as reminders, constant reminders to feed our light body. We, according to neuroplasticity understanding, we need 10,000 hours in order to change our brain. So that means we want to be utilizing images a lot. We want them all around us. We want them in our environment. We want them in our car. We want them on our desk. We want them in every space that we're in, because those images can make every space that we're in sacred space and help us to activate our neural connections with these beings. And this is why the Tibetans say that just seeing these images awaken us. And over again, we're presented with this idea that we have a divine and radiant self that we're always connected to. We've just forgotten about it. The images help us to recall our true selves. They help us to align our consciousness and to reprogram our brain to match that of these avatars. And again, this is why Claire and I have spent literally hundreds, if not thousands of hours seeking these images, spending thousands upon thousands of dollars acquiring these images so that you can put them in your toolkit, so that they can become part of your spiritual practice. And again, this message, I've repeated it over and over. I'm going to keep repeating it. And the idea is that as an enlightened being, Padmasambhava in this example has the ability to transmit his vibration of enlightenment to seekers through an image which is equal to pure spirit energy. And what this means is that the image of Padmasambhava in his rainbow body transmits the vibrations of this perfect state. This is why the Tibetans teach that just seeing images of the rainbow body activates our own glory body. And we practice activating our light body by contemplating, meditating, and reflecting on the images that I have presented here. The image puts you in the energy field of the guru, who is a being of pure spirit energy. We, in the image of Padmasambhava, are actually 2 extremes. We have flesh and blood bodies. He doesn't. He can take one on if he wanted to, but we don't have as much compassion as we would like to have. And Padmasambhava has a body made of rainbows and boundless, impartial compassion. When we put those 2 extremes together in the rainbow body meditation, the visualization that we're looking at here, we move in the direction of manifesting as a being with a flesh and blood body and unlimited compassion, with maybe a few rainbows thrown in for decoration. We don't actually have to go full rainbow body in order to benefit from this or feel like that will never happen to me. I often cite the cartoon I saw once of the 2 caterpillars looking at the butterfly, and Padmasambhava here is the butterfly, And one caterpillar says to the other, "You'll never get me up in one of those things." You don't have to go fully up in the rainbow light body in order to awaken your divine self. In fact, Carlos Castaneda taught Don Juan that you just have to lift the rainbow body to the level of your toe. That gives me hope that as I contemplate these images for hundreds and thousands of hours, that, hey, if I can just get a little bit activated within me, I can transmit it to others. The thing is that imagining we're just like Padmasambhava is not just like wanting to turn ourselves into a Learjet or an AI computer or something. As Christianity teaches, we already have everything we need. We have the spiritual capacity to awaken our own unlimited compassion and to become like Christ or Buddha. And the purpose of the rainbow body meditation is actually to help us to realize that to become conscious of that aspect of our intrinsic nature is the first step in this practice. So these images that you see here are actually your new tools to help you to reconnect with your divine nature, to not remain in doubt about this state, and to continue to remain in this state. Whether it's Padmasambhava or Jesus, you can put these on your desktop. You can meditate on these images and begin to receive this vibration. One of the greatest of all time painters is John Van Eyck, who painted this favorite image of Jesus. He is credited with being an alchemist, a spy, and the inventor of oil painting. And he understood this concept that the painting is a conduit into the divine realm. Because in this example here, which is considered to be the most stolen painting in all human history, it's his Mystic Lamb painting. He intended this painting to be a meditative aid by inserting clever cross-references between the items in the painting and the mass in which it was opened. For instance, there's a towel similar to the one worn by the altar boys at the mass that's painted in a niche. This links the event of the painting with the mass being performed. So Van Eyck intended the viewer to stand before this image and actually receive the spray of divine light coming from the Holy Spirit that the mystic lamb is actually receiving on the altar. He understood, as Akhenaten understood, that the image can show you the way, that we can connect with the divine realm, the divine light of the Atan, the light that illuminates the sun, which is the Holy Spirit, through an image. So it's actually little wonder, isn't it, that the way Van Eyck portrays the spray of the Holy Spirit matches almost precisely what we see in Akhenaten's imagery. He also shows Jesus as a high priest of the order of Melchizedek, wearing his breastplate, got his rod in his hand, got his helmet of salvation on. When light would hit that breastplate, rainbows would spray all through the room. And that is why I believe that what Van Eyck is showing is Jesus, in fact, as a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, which means a state of being that is in the same state of being as the rainbow light body beings of Tibet. And that's what he was hoping to show us through this painting, is that through this light, we can feed our light body. We can become like Melchizedek. We can become like Christ. We can become like Akhenaten and receive that divine light. That is the message. And this is the value of crossing between Christianity and Buddhist art and Tibetan art and the Egyptian tradition and going back to Mesopotamia. They're all telling the same story. Art is a conduit. Art can be used as a stairway to heaven. Art is the stairway to heaven, the portal to the divine that we're all seeking. And by incorporating sacred art into our spiritual practice, we have recovered the lost art of living ascension, that we can utilize this as a method of connecting with the divine realm and ultimately as a way of expanding our consciousness and turning our brain, or tuning rather our brain, into the brain or mind of Christ, Buddha, Akhenaten, whatever avatar we seek to connect with, or in fact do connect with. Jesus with his resurrection stick and his crown and his golden rays, it's exactly the same as what we see with Padmasambhava, with his resurrection stick and his crown and his golden rays. This is the art of ascension that we're talking about. And I hope that some of the images that I presented to you today, which is kind of, as I said, to the front door or gate into our larger teaching that we will be presenting at Emergence in Nashville in April. I hope these images have inspired you, that they give you hope, that show you that there is a divine element to this art. You always intuited that there was. You always knew that there was something about these images, but you maybe couldn't quite put your finger on it. Maybe you didn't have the understanding, but you have it now. And I believe that what I've accomplished today, or what I sought out to accomplish, was to provide you with this timeline, this chronology that shows you that this is a spiritual practice that goes back thousands of years. It crosses over traditions. It's not just for men, it's not just for women, it's for all of us to utilize, that we can in fact awaken our divine self and become more than human. We can enter into the divine realm through the image. I've got just a few minutes left here, and I wanted to share with you one of my favorite examples, just a personal favorite. I'll leave you with this one. And again, I've got so much more to show you. I wish we had more than 2 hours. We actually need quite a number of hours to continually go over this, to pull back the science of it, to bring in yet more images, more mind-blowing images. And in fact, Claire and I are so excited about our April event because we will present to you 2 images, above all, that emphatically show, beyond any shadow of a doubt, indisputably, that our consciousness and the divine consciousness can be connected through art. And that one of the greatest divine beings and avatars in all of human history was an artist. And this figure left for us, indisputably, for the purpose of enlightenment, images that we can use to connect with the divine realm. I know that's a big tease, but we're so excited about this. I couldn't show it to you today because it would be so rushed, but the evidence is there. The story is mind-boggling, and you simply will be, as I am, every time I contemplate the story that we're going to tell at Emergence. The story is just beyond, almost beyond comprehension. It is so mind-boggling, and it is so simple and elegant, this practice. And everybody can begin to utilize images in their daily spiritual practice as a way of retraining their brain, activating their consciousness, and linking with these divine beings. So I'm just going to leave you here with this final example. It's at Hatfield House in England. The subject is Queen Elizabeth. The artist is Walter Isaac. The person who's directing it is a magician by the name of Dr. John Dee. This is a painting called the Rainbow Portrait of Queen Elizabeth that was created with the intention that it would draw down spiritual powers that would act as a conduit between Great Britain and the divine realm. As long as this painting is on the wall at Hatfield House or elsewhere, it is actually drawing in spiritual energy that will assure the prosperity of the British Empire. That is the purpose, the stated purpose, in his own words, for which Dr. John Dee designed this painting that shows Queen Elizabeth I holding onto a rainbow. She has eyes all over her body. Now, traditional historians would tell you, oh, those eyes symbolize that there were spies everywhere in Tudor England, that Queen Elizabeth heard all and knew all. But there's another meaning that's lost to traditional history here, and that is that Queen Elizabeth was viewed from the very beginning as a fairy queen, as a star child, that she in fact embodied cosmic principles and cosmic teachings. She was in fact an angel on earth, and specifically a seraphim angel. The seraphim angels are portrayed with eyes all over their body, just like Queen Elizabeth is shown here. They are plasma type beings whose plasma bodies actually match the plasma state of being of the rainbow light body. I believe that what Dr. John Dee was creating with the Rainbow Portrait was an image of the ascended Queen Elizabeth. the Queen Elizabeth, who benefited from Dr. John Dee's teachings, which he said he channeled from the Watcher angels, the very same angels who brought light body teachings to the ancient Essenes and others. So she is being portrayed as a rainbow light body being, and the image itself is considered to be, or was created with the intention that in this ascended state, Queen Elizabeth could transmit to the British people a divine vibration that would assure their prosperity. So in closing, I hope that you have enjoyed this presentation today. We got into some subjects that I hope blow your mind wide open and your imagination wide open and give you a sense of the power of these divine beings, of these avatars, of the Christ, of the Buddha, of other beings, that the Anunnaki even, and the power of the image. There's so much more behind this that I would like to get into with you. And I'm inviting you to come to Nashville in April, or come to other events where we have more time to explore the quantum science behind this and how it's possible that images can be used as to transmit this divine presence. There's more neuroscience to be shared. There's more to be explored. This is just the beginning. So I want to thank Neil Gore and Portals to Ascension for hosting this event today. I'm deeply grateful for all of you to share this time with you today, to be able to share this information. And I send you all highest blessings from Claire and I here in Nashville. And we look forward to seeing you here in Nashville or on down the road somewhere else. Perhaps you'll come to Egypt with us, or Italy, or England, or France, and enjoy traveling with us as we enjoy traveling with you. So Godspeed to all of you, and thank you all very, very much.